Welcome to Calm Voice Audio, where stories come to life. Relax, listen, and enjoy. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
The Princess and the Human Book, to Prologue. The light coming off of the nearby twin star formation dimly illuminated the left half of KRL's face as she leisurely sat in her chair in Captain's quarter. One of the few places on the Hunter where she wasn't one step away from an anxiety attack. The Hunter was a light cruiser, currently leading a destroyer flotilla en route patrol around the bridgeway. This piece of space was called such because nothing was here. It simply was the shortest path between two disconnected hyperlanes and was an inevitable route if the Crystal wanted to traverse from their planet to Homie and vice versa. Apparently, a new trade deal made the route even more important than before. How had KRNDL ended up leading an entire flotilla, securing one of the appropriately named secure routes? Fuck if she knew the Crystal. Being the only carnivorous species within the Alliance, had a name for being ferocious and tenacious fighters. KRNDL had no idea how that was supposed to follow. Their ancestors had been scavengers rather than predators after all. A detail nobody seemed to care about. Sure, they had one of the strongest fleets, together with the Veneri, and maybe but thanks to their seclusion, no one knew for certain. Corndell also thought. She could recall hearing something about her kind having a decisive role in the Alliance war, but she didn't know that one for sure. She was no historian after all. Not that it mattered. The point was, her species as a whole hardly lived up to its name. Some individuals might, but she definitely wasn't among them. She hadn't even wanted to become a soldier in the first place. At a time when she couldn't decide what to do with her life, a mixture of peer pressure and bad timing had brought her to the barracks. She had then planned to lay low and later apply for some backline position, maybe the Signal Corps or something like that. Nothing with risk to her life, and nothing with too much responsibility. That was the goal. The others in her group had all been quite eager and ambitious, so she thought it wouldn't be too hard to not stand out. But somehow, not standing out had been what made her stand out. Ambitious people always want to prove themselves, and that will always cause more problems than it solves. I don't need an ambitious commander, I need one who simply does their job. Jerk who promoted someone on that basis. Her attempts of dodging the way up by displaying herself as risk-averse had achieved the exact opposite because someone that resourceful is wasted on a small ship. Her fear of making the wrong decisions then prompted her to never make any herself. Instead, she always lets someone who seemed to know their stuff make the call. But apparently, the ability to correctly delegate is a sign of a capable leader. And now she was here, tasked with arguably one of the most important duties during peacetime, despite never having seen any form of battle. At first her job had been an absolute nightmare. Day in and day out she had dreaded anything happening. Not just an attack that would risk her life, but any situation that would require her to make an important decision. By now it had gotten better. She now was in her position for about a cycle and a half, and she had learned that the chances of an attack were actually quite slim. Not because the Karasaka weren't out for blood. They still absolutely were. They simply showed no interest in fighting the patrol fleets. They preferred quick strikes against single targets, and if they should find a gap in the patrol, it wouldn't be KRNL's fault. She would simply stick to the plan. If the plan had such a gap, it wasn't her fault. Would someone else in her position regularly audit the plan? Maybe, but as stated, she was wholly unqualified for her position. Unfortunately, it was too late to go for a different career path. All she could do was hold out until she could afford an early retirement. The console on the other side of the room beeped. She hated that noise. It meant someone wanted to contact her. And it wasn't one of the regular reports that she would always pretend to evaluate or understand. For that matter. No, if this console beeped, something came up that the regular procedure didn't account for. Which meant she had to make a decision. Which meant another chance for her to mess up big time. Yes. She asked, opening the channel, ma'am. We are receiving a strange signal. It doesn't fit any code, but the way it repeats makes it look like a distress signal. Shit, I'm coming. Call R&DZ to the bridge as well. Yes, ma'am. KRNDL took a deep breath to ease her nerves, before donning her insignia and making her way to the bridge. It wasn't far from her quarters, so the walk was short. Way too short for her taste. But wishing for the walk not to end, it would feel even shorter. Alas, before she could do much to calm herself, she was already there. Surprisingly, R&DZ was already waiting for her status. She called one of the standard lines she had often heard other captains use. The operator quickly briefed R&DZ about what he had just told her. R&DZ was the hunter's lead engineer. Or was it lead mechanic? The guy responsible for anything tech-related. Once the operator was done, Crandall said what? To be her most used ever sentence. She had been given the slightest bit of responsibility. So what's your opinion? R&DZ gave the data a quick glance before answering. There is either something interfering with the signal or the source is about to run out of power. But even if we ignore that, it's far off from anything used within the Alliance. And the direction it comes from is also far away from the secure routes for that matter. But to my knowledge, there are no records of the Karasaka using it either. It's definitely a distress signal, though the sequence is too short and too repetitive to be anything else. Has our telescope found the source already? Operator KRNDL passed on the question. Not yet, the signal is weak. So it's hard to pin. Cornell did her best to appear calm. This was exactly the situation she wanted to avoid. Was there really someone in peril? Was this a trap? What should she do? Is someone traversing the bridge? She finally asked the operator if yes. That would make the decision for her. No, we can take a look, Captain. Which ships should I give the order to move? The operator asked clearly, misunderstanding her intent. Tell the flotilla to follow us. Oh, ma'am. Yes. Yes, we are. Can't risk this being a trap. The order got relayed and the formation changed course. They were quite a bit away from the secure route. A fact KRNDL felt really nervous about when they finally managed to catch it with their telescope. It being about the last thing KRNDL wanted to see right now. That's a Kurosaka raider. She was about to scream to her gunners to blast the damn thing into oblivion. But the moment of shock delayed her reaction, which gave R&D enough time to point out a crucial detail. Seems to be out of power though. Do we get an energy reading? None. But it's definitely the source of the signal, the operator clarified, allowing KRNDL to not go into full panic mode. Ma'am, we should try to salvage it, R&DZ requested. It could give us invaluable insight into their tech. Should she listen to him? Listening to what better qualified people said had more or less been what stopped her from making bad decisions so far. But she couldn't help but be afraid of the little ship, despite the absolutely massive difference in firepower. With a shaking finger, she opened the channel that connected all ships. Surround the raider, but keep your guns pointed at it at all times. Pursuer, prepare a boarding crew. Affirmations from the captains of the various ships came back before each of them went into position. Slowly, the destroyer Pursuer closed in on its target. Keep the comm channel open at all times, she ordered as she could see the boarding tunnel steadily extend to the raider. If at any point it looks like the Karaskas are still alive, seal off the tunnel. The affirmation didn't sound very enthusiastic. Not that she couldn't understand them, considering the order. Shortly before the tunnel reached its destination, it stopped. The airlock seems destroyed. Ma'am. Sending image. A photograph of the raider's airlock appeared on her console. To call it broken was an understatement. It looked as if something had been connected to it and then had gotten torn off. The door behind it seemed still intact, though if it had an emergency mechanism, it was probably sealed shut. Requesting permission to cut a new hole. Permission granted. As long as the boarding crew seemed to know what they were doing, she would simply play it safe. The pursuer changed position and connected the tunnel to a flat surface on the side of the ship. It took a while, until they managed to cut through the wall. No artificial gravity on board. Requesting permission to extend the pursuer's gravity field. Permission granted. As the squad boarded the small ship, KRNDL realized she hadn't confirmed whether all of them were wearing spacesuits. They probably were right. Anything else made no sense. Oxygen levels are low, but breathable. Temperature is still above the freezing point. Then the life support can't be off for long. Though it depends on how good the insulation is. Ma'am, you may want to call Dr. Nakara as well. KRNDL nodded and called the ship's physician to the bridge. Shortly after the next report came in. Area clear. Sending image. That looks an awful lot like Veneer Tech R&D, Z commented as he saw the room through which the crew had entered. Interesting, KRNDL answered. Unsure what else to say. The doctor joined them, and after he was quickly briefed as well, the next report came in. We found 2 dead Carrasca. Sending image. The photograph showed the mangled corpses of the 2 insectoids, one having its entire side cave in, while the other was almost bisected. While it was good that those monsters were dead, the question of what brought them to this state was one R&D dreaded to hear the answer to. Dried purple blood was smeared, not exactly where the 2 lay, but that was likely due to the duct and reactivation of gravity. Well, I guess the cause of death is quite obvious. Time of death is difficult to estimate from the picture. But they didn't die yesterday. Assuming R&DZ is right, and the power hasn't been out for long yet, I'd say something between 30 to 40 days ago. The news that they had been dead for so long was somewhat comforting. But one raider was commonly manned by 5 cars, and since the inside of the ship was still in livable condition, the other 3 could still be alive. The boarding crew split into 2 teams and combed through the ship. It didn't take long until they found 2 more dead, Karasaka both having died in similar, gruesome ways as the first 2. We found the door to the bridge. One team announced it's locked. But we can cut it open. Wait until the 5th, Karasaka is confirmed dead. The other team reported shortly after. We found the 5th one also dead. And there is something else. Sending image. Looks like an escape pod. R&DZ analyzed the picture. But it isn't any tech I'm familiar with. That could be the source of the signal. Did that mean whoever had been in the escape pod killed the Carrasca? Could they be an ally then? But what kind of weaponry did they possess to produce such results? Team 1 requesting permission to cut open the door to the bridge. A voice from the console pulled KRND out of her thoughts. Yes. Permission granted. Wait, the other team called out. We found another one. Sending image. KRNDL took a sharp breath as the next picture appeared. Why was there a 6th Carrasca? There should have only been 5. This one died far more recently. The doctor next to her pointed out May. 15 to 20 days ago. That explains the broken airlock, R&DZ commented. Another ship docked to see what happened, and the new crew got killed as well. Then the ships drifted apart, causing the connection point to break off. Oh, right. That made sense. In that case, look for 4 more corpses before we open the door. Slowly but surely, the remaining dead Karasuma were found, all having died roughly at the same time as the 6. But no sign of the culprit so far. Team 1 then proceeded to cut through the locking mechanism of the door to the bridge. Thanks to some hints from R&DZ, who, based on the ship's similarity to Venari Tech, correctly assumed the weak spots. It didn't take too long. Wait. Wouldn't it have been safer to first cut out a peephole? The voice stopped. It didn't sound like the connection had broken off. He had simply stopped talking. Team 1, no answer. KRNDL started to panic. Team 1. She called out again. Sorry ma'am. Sending image. What in the world is that? KRNDL didn't know what to say as she looked at the new photograph. It showed a creature she had never seen before. It appeared to be wearing clothes, drenched in the same dark purple as the blood they had seen all over the ship, which was a hint to it being sentient. But if the doctor didn't know it, it couldn't be one of the Alliance races. She herself had also never seen anything similar. The alien had light brown skin with a bluish hue, seemingly no carapace or scales, and no fur, except for a rather large, rust-colored patch on top of its head. It also looked like it was bipedal, but KRNDL wasn't completely sure about that. After all, the alien wasn't standing. It was well hanging, suspended from the ceiling by a cable tied around its neck. The Princess and the Human Book, to CH1. 31st day after my arrival. Dear Diary, going by Earth's calendar, I now would have spent an entire month on Homie. Although the days here are slightly longer, so I guess it's actually a bit more than that. Either way, it certainly was an eventful month. Over the last week, things have finally calmed down a bit. Still has recovered enough to get back to work, even if not at full capacity. She also can't stand for long yet. She also started to prepare delegations to the other species to see if any of them met the rest of the colony. They will depart soon. I'm not sure if I should hope for or fear getting an answer. I want nothing more than to hear that the rest is all right. But that's not the only reply that could come back. Either way, it will take a while. I swear, if I hear the phrase, travel slowly beyond the hyperlanes, one more time, I'm gonna lose it. Today in the evening is the trial. Which also means, it is time for me to step out of the shadows. Honestly, my heart hasn't calmed down at all yet. Thankfully, longer days also mean longer nights. Otherwise, I wouldn't nearly have gotten enough sleep. My speech is ready, and both Doc and the Baron did their best to prepare me. I know it word by word. All that's left is to not embarrass myself, and still, while literally the entire planet is watching me. No biggie. Part of me wants to ask, if not broadcasting, everything is an option. At least not live. I know it is not, but still. At least I don't have to be near anybody. And Ocean promised he would finish the protective suit today, so that will probably also help. To think that this shady guy from the Tay Street had so many spies on the planet. Good thing they managed to decrypt his datapad. Captain Casca has been able to discreetly arrest most of them without it being made public. For their trial itself, it's more or less a clean case. And once the opener is done, I won't have to do anything except keep my rage down when I see the ambassador. Honestly, I didn't even know I could get this angry. In hindsight, it is scary. But I have to keep it down. I must be better than that. The sun rose over the walls of the Sky Palace as Queen Mervani started her day. Today it would be her turn again. To visit Kirtine at the hospital, something she was looking forward to. She knew that she and her partner, King Kirta, would get informed immediately should his condition take a turn for the worse, but it still was a relief each time she saw him being fine. Well, as fine as he could be, given the circumstances. He was still a nursing case until his first molting, and if the doctor's estimates were correct, he would be on the verge of adulthood by the time he made a full recovery. She was still seething from anger whenever she thought about it. This first one's damned Soliak had almost killed her precious son and robbed him of his childhood in the process, and for nothing else than his stupid company. And while she could find some satisfaction in the knowledge that she had brought him to justice, that didn't change his situation. She shook her head and entered the audience hall, which was currently fairly empty. Only the king and the palace's steward were here, for now, and for the rest. He can just ask Reggie. You know, the one who always does this weird thing when she talks. Like, I assume you are talking about Duchess Regerian of Clan Jaren. The steward was quick to interpret the king's words. who has a birth defect that sometimes causes her throat to act up, slightly impairing her speech pattern. Kieran tilted his head. Is that how it's called? I mean, the thing still often did as a kid, especially when she was angry. That was really adorable. It at least sounds similar to what Reggie does. It's of course not really adorable when an adult does it. And she's just doing it randomly, not just when she's angry, so it can get a bit weird for a teen. Mervani thought she could see the steward wincing, though she probably just imagined that. After all, why should he? Your Majesty, I'm sure you have a lot else to do. How about I formulate the answer, and you just sign it? Good to see that his job is not just a mere duty to him. The Queen mentally noted the steward's eagerness as she went over to her partner, who merely shrugged and dismissed him. Unification Day. Kiara nodded at his partner's assumption. You'd think they would know what to do for something that happens every cycle. Did you hear anything new from the building yard? Yes, we apologize for the delay. The plans should be finished in a few days. They apparently had to reschedule because of an unexpected shortage of manpower. Adjusting her yellow cape, she sat down, and still no news about Syl finally finding a partner. Or at least that she's looking for one. The king just shook his head. Then, he started to chuckle. You know, maybe we should give her the throne a bit sooner. To motivate her, even she can't rule the planet alone. She would try anyway. Mervani joined him in his laughter. But, jokes aside, we're not that old yet. Maybe in 5 cycles we can do that. Though we should have at least a grandchild. When a frantic knocking at the door interrupted her. And upon being called in, a stressed-looking servant to the king and queen. Why, your majesties. We received an urgent message from the Star Palace. What happened? The servant fidgeted slightly. Before I can relay the message, and I'm quoting Her Highness, Princess Soldvani on this, make both my father and my mother promise to listen to the end before they do anything. Again her orders. Kieran cocked his head and looked at his partner. Why does she always do that? No idea. Anyway, I promise. Me too. The servant nodded. Okay, then there was an attempt on Her Highness's life. She was poisoned, but what? Both screamed in unison. She survived. The servant hurriedly reassured them. Who did it? The king demanded. Are the suspects? How did it occur? The queen added the culprit was already caught. Then have them brought here immediately. Prepare the trial ASAP. I quote Her Highness again. Since you entirely relinquished all authority relating to foreign matters to me due to the specific circumstances of this case, I outrank you in this. Since I myself was the wronged party, by the laws of our ancestors, you do not qualify to hold the trial. As the highest authority on Homi in all foreign matters, I hereby invoke the rule of impossibility for a judge of higher rank and declare myself judge in this matter. The two went silent for a moment, until the king spoke again. But has she already recovered enough for that? By her own testimony, yes. The trial will start in one invade. And yes, it will be broadcasted live. Merwani nodded. Cancel all of our appointments for today. She ordered the servant, and activated the big screen. At the end of the audience hall, once the news got out, the palace was in turmoil. Accidents and endangerment born from incompetency were one thing. But an active assassination attempt on the royal family that had never happened during the lifetime of anyone still alive today. Finally, the broadcast started. Mervani could see her daughter on the screen, and she couldn't help but notice how weak she looked. But her expression was one of pure determination. Across from her, cuffed to a chair, sat a Tiestri, a matriarch. Judging by the size, could it be? The trial in the case of Kikla, ambassador of planet Iran, and representative of the is hereby open. She could hear her daughter's voice from the speakers. As there is more than one wronged party, the word is first with the one wronged last. As it is our tradition. More than one. What was she talking about? The message hadn't said anything about that. Who is that? Kirta inquired, as a strange creature came into the picture, bowing before Salvani, before turning to the audience. Or what? Mervani could only agree if it was an alien. She had never seen it before. It didn't even look close to any of the species in the Alliance. A pale body with neither skin nor fur, except for one rather large patch on its head, so long it almost reached her hips. The face had a reddish hue, with eyes that shimmered blue in the light of the headlamps. Its body was quite small, with a delicate frame, which made it difficult to believe that such a frail species could even survive until reaching civilization. The clothes it wore were rather excessive, a white something covered almost its entire body from the neck down, but as this was seemingly not enough for it, it also wore a green top and a blue skirt over it, the latter being similar in style to the fashion of Homi's nobility. It didn't speak at first. Instead, its hands rose to its neck, and almost demonstratively slowly, it took off its translator. I am Nadine Valentina Esmeralda, Anastasia von Cloud of House Haydenfeld, ambassador of planet Earth and representative of the humans, it said in a soft voice. Its accent was quite notable, but besides that, it surprisingly spoke perfect Vaneri. Few people bothered learning the language of another species, as it took a good portion of one's life to master it. And before mastering it, translators were more reliable, even if they weren't perfect. And what definitely never happened was a noble learning another language. They would, at best, fund it for one of their servants, and all that was, assuming it was a language they could physically speak. For the sake of a more fluid procedure, I hereby declare that humanity its right of the prosecution to the Vanari for this case only the day before. Are you sure you don't want to prosecute her yourself as well? So Vanni asked, as the small alien rehearsed her speech for a final time, her gloved hands holding the notes, shaking in nervousness. You would have any right to do so. Not by our laws, Nadine refuted. And I really don't want to do something that could cause issues later on. Calling myself the ambassador of humanity is already more than stretching it. You literally represent every human known to the Vaneri. The princess shrugged still. We both know that that's a technicality, and that I don't have any real power. I get that I have to say it, so this doesn't turn into a massive political clusterfuck. But anything beyond that could mean serious trouble at some point. Besides, it's not like it would change anything. I mean, is there any way this will end without you ordering her execution? Well, we have to inform her home planet about the verdict, and they could theoretically appeal it. But considering how clear-cut the case is, I doubt they will. Then it makes no difference. After a short knock on the door, Maida entered with a box in her hands. Lady Nadine, a package arrived for you. With a thankful nod, the small alien took the box and left for the adjacent room. What the hell? She suddenly shouted from behind the door. Did something happen? Look at this. Nadine read, her face having taken on a more reddish color, blushing as Silvani now knew it was called. Instead of just being long-sleeved gloves, her new protective suit covered everything from the neck down. It was a single piece with no visible seams, even the gloves weren't separate. The only things not covered were her face and feet. This would hopefully alleviate her fear of touching someone. Her reaction was strange though. What is the problem? Isn't this exactly what you ordered? Covering everything white so it can be easily combined with other articles of clothing, and a bit tighter fitting so you can wear other things over it. Nadine's expression on the princess's statement was one of complete bewilderment. There is a difference between a bit tighter fitting and a freaking spandex. Hey, what? I can't wear this. This is worse than being naked. Savani tilted her head in confusion. How so? I get that. Your kind has a different attitude to clothing than we have, but I really don't see the issue here. But I look. If it is that bad, no one forces you to wear it. You could just wear your normal clothes, but, considering what happened, I also understand you don't want to risk your sweat getting on someone. There is no established connection yet, so no one will judge you for your clothes, but you not making an appearance today sadly is no longer an option. Wear whatever makes you feel most comfortable, but if you want a protective suit, that's the only one we have. And as I said, it was designed with you wearing something else over it in mind anyway. For a while, it seemed like Nadine wanted to say something, but in the end, she sighed. Please promise me that no human will ever see the recording of this trial. At least not the part where I am visible. If it is important to you, that can be arranged. Giffey gave Nadine a nod, as the small alien sat down next to her, invisibly deflated, before putting on her translator again. It was good, she reassured her. Your pronunciation could still use some work, but each word was correct. Even for a rehearsed speech, it was impressive considering how little time you had. Nadine just nodded, and turned her gaze back to the center of the hall, where a vassal started to announce the accusation. On the 87th day of the cycle, the defendant coerced the maid, Kyla, who, at the time, was temporarily stationed at the Star Palace, to administer Her Highness Princess Salvani a lethal dose of calcium that would have killed her had it not been for the immediate and heroic actions of Lady Nadine of the humans. The defendant then had Kayla killed, making it look like suicide, to blame the crime entirely on her. On the 90th day of the cycle, when Lady Nadine uncovered the ruse, the defendant used a network of spies within our own people, which is currently being dealt with, to administer her the highly restricted and dangerous neurotoxin ethanol, which she only survived due to her unique physique, which the defendant had no knowledge of. The defendant finally attempted to blame Giffey of Clan Troku, royal physician at the Star Palace, for the deed. Nervous muttering could be heard among the audience, even more than after Nadine's speech. Both Giffey and the princess had agreed to not put emphasis on the doctor's role in saving the princess's life. One, because it was her job, and two, because all of this had the secondary purpose of giving Nadine a good image right from the get-go. Therefore, they made sure to highlight Nadine's feats. During the accusation, once the princess raised her voice, the muttering quickly died down. Kikla, ambassador of planet Ira, and representative of the T. You are accused of attempted regicide, attempted homicide, murder of a commoner, conspiring and defamation in multiple cases. What do you have to say? The ambassador cocked her head in a way that looked almost mockingly. I was just following orders. The High Council were the ones who decided that Princess Silvani needed to be removed. All I did was in service of my people, as all of you would have done for your own. She made a dramatic pause, in which the entire hall fell absolutely silent. Is that what you want to hear from me? That's what you hope I would say? Give you a reason to punish all of my kind for the acts of one individual, right? I hope that you just make your statement already, the princess answered with a sinister voice. What is there to state? Your servant already said everything I did as is written in the accusation, and I did so on my own accord. No one on Heroes knew I would do that. I myself made the decision only after arriving here. A decision that almost got me killed. Thanks to that thing over there. My only accomplices were Keela, if whatever your little monster left of him can still be identified, and whoever on this planet worked for him. I never met any of his friends, as he called them, but you seem to have that topic already covered anyway. With that, she leaned back in her chair, making it clear that she had said her piece. The rest of the trial was standard procedure. Some guards and servants gave their statements, and Gaitha explained a bit about the poisons and their effects, until it was time for the verdict. Kikla of the Tistri. For your crimes, I hereby sentence you to death. The sentence will be put on hold, and you will be imprisoned until the High Council of Aroas confirms the verdict. By the first ones, Silvani, of Clan Kirin, Princess of the Venari, have spoken. Outraged chatter filled the hall as the audience left, while Nadine and Giffey rushed over to the princess. Your Highness, how are you feeling? I'll manage. But I should go to rest. As they escorted the princess to her private chambers, They noticed some servants muttering hastily. "Is there an issue?" she asked as always, not being able to leave it to others. "And no, Your Highness," one of them quickly assured her. "There was a short power outage a bit after the start of the trial, and we're currently trying to find out how it happened. But you don't need to worry, Your Highness. It was just for a few ticks, and we managed to get the broadcast up again immediately. So everyone saw the verdict." "Yes, I can guarantee that." "All right then, carry on." Finally, they reached the chambers, and so Vanny sank into her chair with an exhausted groan. "What happens next?" Nadine wanted to know now. "We send a delegation to Ir to tell them what happened. Since Kikla is not a citizen and a representative, her own people must confirm the verdict before we can enact it. But as I said, with all the evidence in her own confession, they won't try to appeal it. It's just a formality at this point. But considering the travel time and the fact that they will likely be in turmoil, when they hear it, it can take up to 30 days, until we have the confirmation. We likely won't hear from them till then, since word travels slowly beyond the hyper. I know the princess and the human book 2ch2. With a sound of relief, Silvani sank into the soft chair in her room. Even if it had gone over comparatively quickly, considering how politically charged this case was, it had still been quite exhausting for her. Her recovery wasn't nearly at the point she would have liked, but she knew that was unrealistic to expect that after just a couple of days. According to the doctor, the fact that she could already walk a bit was above expectation. Just how long would it take until she could operate at full capacity again? She didn't know the good news was that Kikla had admitted that she and her henchmen had done the deed by themselves, so unless her government would appeal the sentence, the political fallout would be minimal. A formal apology from the council, and a few concessions, and that would be it. It actually put Homie in a favorable position that she could use to find out what the testary were hiding. Lastly, her parents had someone they could direct their anger at and wouldn't do anything rash. If all of that would have been backed by the High Council, better not think about it. What had actually shocked her was the spy network Kikla's servant had established right under their noses. None of those spies had been directly in any of the 3 palaces, but that didn't put them out of their sphere of influence. Like the one in the medical administration who had faked the order with Dr. Giffith's license, or the one working for their food supplier, who had noticed their greatly increased demand for Guthra's fruits and correctly assumed that they were for Nadine. No nobles were among them. Most were the type of people you could easily overlook or forget they were even there, which had probably been the point. According to the guards' reports, this Kilo had recruited his spies through a mixture of bribes and coercion. Over secrets he had somehow found out about them. The sheer number had been quite impressive, considering he would have only had the chance to do so during the diplomatic visits. Although, according to the interrogations, none of the spies worked permanently for him. It was more of a one-time favor kind of deal, all of which had been cashed in by now. Since all of them said the same thing, independently from each other, it was likely true. Not that it made much of a difference. Treason was still treason, meaning they were about to have a mass execution she was absolutely not looking forward to. So Vanny leaned back, enjoying the soothing rest she was finally able to get, earning concerned looks from her company. "While I've more or less understood your legal system," Nadine stated with audible annoyance, "I still don't get why you had to be there in person. Don't worry. It was exhausting, yes. But it wasn't that bad. Right, you are only recovering from a severe poisoning that almost killed you and half your arms are broken, which, not gonna lie, feels really weird to say," she quipped sarcastically. "Why couldn't you just hold the trial remotely? Works fine on Earth." That would indeed have been better for her, Dr. Giffith agreed while doing a quick checkup. But it, unfortunately, would have gone against our traditions. TSK tradition is the corpse of wisdom. The small alien grumbled and crossed her arms in a way that looked quite adorable. The phrase itself was interesting though. So Vanny would make sure to remember and later spend some thought on it. I appreciate your concern. I really do, she assured the human. But there is no one I could delegate my work to. Kirtin would be too young and inexperienced, even if he wasn't hospitalized. And you know why I can't give it to my parents? Speaking of, we already got a number of requests to meet Lady Nadine, a rather impressive one, considering the trial ended not even an NVA Mita ago. Finally chimed in, making Silvani shake her head. Is there an easy way to say no to this? The girl in question asked the princess sheepishly, her demeanor taking a sharp turn from the previous conversation. For now, we'll say that you can't make any promises until you've met with the king and queen. Which is actually true. My parents will want to meet her sooner or later. We must give them priority. Despite everything else, they still were the king and queen after all. Midna nodded and exited the room, and after confirming her condition was as good as it could be, the doctor followed shortly after. Only the princess and the human were left. You know, I won't push for the meeting. And wait until they contact us. That'll give you some time. But, even if you can't discuss anything of political value, you won't get around meeting at least some of the nobles sooner or later. And as much as I want to and will support you, socializing with other influential people would still be good for you, now that you are a public figure. Even if you don't have any real influence among your kind, your actions could still greatly help them. Once we will inevitably make first contact properly. Not to mention the award ceremony. We shouldn't wait too long with that either. Nadine swallowed but nodded eventually. I know it's just the thought of me messing up during such gathering with all those old houses. I don't want to cause trouble for you. Your clan is actually older than any you would find on Homie. Really? Yes, at least by years. If we count by generations, it might be a close call. Save for a few exceptions, most modern clans were only formed after the Unification War, with rank and territory, depending on the contribution during the war, especially Clan Ravani, whose founder is said to have been a decisive factor to Kiran's victory. Silvani sighed. It is probably a strange concept for a human. Unfortunately, not every species is as peace-loving as yours. To that the small alien perked up. Peace-loving? No offense, Sil, but what the hell made you think? That is a term that accurately describes humans, don't get me wrong. War is a tragedy, no matter how big or small, but humans aren't, or, well, I guess humans are. But as much as I hate the fact humanity is anything but. But didn't you say your kind didn't have any major wars? That you didn't have any big warships, because you didn't need them. Sylvain certainly still remembered the girl's reaction upon seeing the unifier for the first time. No, I said. We didn't have any major wars since we reached the spacefaring age. And don't forget, you live on a unified planet. We don't. We had quite a number of wars in the past. Really? How many? Since she was no historian, Silvani only knew about those wars in their history that had cultural significance. In other words, the Unification War and the Alliance War. But that didn't mean she didn't have a rough overview of their previous history. As Nadine had said, on a non-unified planet, where your potential adversary was right next to you, tensions could escalate much quicker. And before the unification, there had, unfortunately, been a fair share of wars that tainted Homie's history. If the humans came close to that, it was understandable that Nadine would refuse such a title as peace-loving. Ere few, you can ask questions. Just the big ones. Counting every short dispute as a war would hardly be fair to her people, okay? There are probably many I myself never heard of, but let's see how many I can scratch together from history class. If we ignore all the civil wars, we had the Persian conquests and the resulting wars, the Chinese warring states, the Crusades, the Samnite Wars, the conquest of Alexander the Great, the Punic Wars, the Three Kingdoms War, and the other Three Kingdoms Wars, the conquests of the New World, the Reconquista Un, the Gallic Wars, the Napoleonic Wars, the War of Roses, everything with the Timurid Empire, no idea how many the Ottoman Empire was involved in. The Mediterranean War, the Austro-Hungarian War, Not sure if all the independence wars count as civil wars. The Russo-Japanese War, everything caused by the rise of the USAG, the two world wars of course, what else was there? Despite her usual composed demeanor, Silvani couldn't stop herself from gawking as Nadine's list got longer and longer. Just how many were there also? Was that a translation error? Or why did so many of the names use the plural form? And what did she mean by civil war? Oh, right there was of course the 30 Years' War. 30 years with the last sentence. She couldn't stop herself from interrupting. 30. Even the Unification War, whose 6 cycles had made it one of the longest wars in their history. No, not even the devastating Alliance War had lasted nearly that long. I get that humans live longer, but ignoring the insane costs of such a war. What dispute would be worth fighting for 30 cycles? How can a war even last that long without one side losing? Well, not exactly 30 years, that's a rounded number, Nadine clarified. Okay, but still, even if it was just 27 or so, that is still absolutely insane. Also, Earth's years are longer than our solar cycles, so that is how much? How is that even dash? Or was that the 80 Years' War, the what now? No, wait, it was the 100 Years' War, I think, was it? One of those 3 was rounded, and the other 2 were exactly that long, but I always forget which was which. But it should be. Yeah. It was the 100 Years' War that was rounded down air. Right, yes. That was it. It was actually closer to 115 years. Ooh-huh. Are you alright? The small alien asked, concerned. Number I. And how did you achieve peace in the end? Well, peace is a big word. It actually ties into your other question, regarding not needing big warships. I didn't word that one very well. I didn't mean that we would have no use for them. If our technological development had gone in that direction, I guarantee you, Earth's space would be cluttered with those things, even in relative peacetime. No, we just have a weapon that makes them pointless. As impressive as this huge carrier you showed me is, a human ship the size of a shuttle could blast that thing into oblivion before you even saw the attack coming. A ship the size of a shuttle. Silvani didn't understand much about engineering, but she knew that the Unifier was basically the current pinnacle of military technology, not just for the Venari, but the entire Alliance, and close to undefeatable unless massively outnumbered. Were humans really that much more advanced, technology-wise? But there had been many things normal for the Venari that Nadine had been surprised by. Was it just this weapon she had mentioned that made such a massive difference? Yes, I apologize. What did you say? So Danny asked, as she got pulled out of her thoughts. Sorry. I thought you said that out loud intentionally. I did. First ones, is she making me lose my composure that much? But you're right, it's mainly this weapon that makes the difference. She leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. Sil. Have you ever heard of the equilibrium of terror, or what was the other term for it? Right. Mutually assured destruction. The Princess and the Human Book to See. 3 Doc. The soft voice of the alien girl addressed Giffey. I told you about the role alcohol, ethanol has in human society. Yes. You did, the doctor affirmed, currently writing down the results of her examination. The princess's health was steadily getting better, but full recovery was not yet in sight. That didn't stop her from getting back to work though. Said Princess was currently sitting upright in her bed, which had been equipped to provide a makeshift workspace, so she didn't have to get up. Mentally she was fully back on track, which showed her commendable willpower. But high willpower couldn't repair to broken arms, or make her body allow her to be awake for longer than half of the day at most. At the same time, however, Even with the trial over, there was still a lot more work piled up from the incident that demanded the princess's attention than expected. And unfortunately, it was the kind that couldn't be postponed until she got better. Not working at all would only be an option if she would temporarily give her duties back to the king and queen. In other words, it was no option. At least not according to the princess. Herself had only met the royal pair once in person, back when she had received her title. Not much word outside of a fixed script had been spoken back there, so she only knew rumors beyond that. Still, if Her Highness was sure that trusting them with her task was a bad idea, she chose to trust her. But that didn't change the fact that they somehow needed to make the best out of a bad situation. That was when Nadine had an idea how to delegate the work that normally couldn't be delegated, overseen by the palace's steward Vase. 3 hand-picked servants, all being from the palace's administrative team, had been temporarily relieved from their duties and worked together with him and the princess under a system Nadine had called the Four Eyes Principle. The whole ordeal was still highly improvised and in dire need of polishing, and the servants obviously lacked the training and qualification to do beyond the preliminary work, but all in all, they were able to work at about 80% of the capacity. The princess alone was able to put out when healthy Guy Fay finalized her notes on the checkup. Nadine was sitting next to her, waiting for Her Highness to be done with her current task. While her question had come out of nowhere, the doctor could indeed remember that specific conversation quite vividly. Ethanol was considered one of the few substances that were universally deadly for all known species, and humans consumed it for fun. There are also people who become addicted to it, the small alien continued. Those are called alcoholics. That certainly was an interesting bit of information, something she would need to add to her notes later. Right off the bat, she could think of a dozen questions she wanted to ask about it, but she still didn't get why Nadine was bringing that up out of nowhere. We also have a word for something similar. It has nothing to do with alcohol, but the term is derived from it. Workaholic. Giffy had to think about the word for a moment. She had never heard it before, but it had sounded venery, so it was made of existing words, just like alcoholic. Just now, as she thought that, she suddenly realized that Nadine had taken the first syllable of alcoholic and had replaced it with work, having overheard the conversation. So Danny looked up. "Did you just call me a work addict?" That certainly wasn't the kind of witty side jab she would have expected from the girl. Then again, she had slowly opened up more. And so, Danny had explicitly invited her to be more casual. They weren't in public after all. So this wasn't a matter of losing face. So all in all, this was fine. The alien girl turned her head. "Am I wrong? I'm not addicted, this simply has to be done. I can't delegate it quite. Air at dimension." So Danny had no idea what the last sentence meant since it didn't get translated, but from Nadine's tone and her gesture towards Vassar, she could guess. If that is her real self, maybe she handled the nobles better than I feared. This is an emergency solution. Normally, it can't be delegated. What we are doing right now is not doable long term. I can't let commoners partake in governmental work. In an instant, Nadine's smile was replaced by an expression so Danny by now knew was called a scowl. "I know what you want to say, and no, that's not what I meant," she quickly added. "I am well aware that capability does not have to come from birth. Otherwise, my headmaid would not be a commoner. That is exactly the point, though. Being my headmaid is already a political statement. But there are limits to this, and governing is a hard border in that context. Sorting messages, or organizing documents, sure, but no direct involvement. There are rumors that my parents let their servants do some of their work, and that is already enough to cost them footing." Nadine was quiet for a while before shaking her head. "That's so dumb. By all respect, you underestimate the gravity of the issue." Lady Nadine Vassar now also broke his silence, looking up from his datapad. "Without the backing of at least the most powerful of the clans, Her Highness will have serious trouble once she becomes queen. Merely the way you speak with Her Highness, even if she condones it, could already cost her reputation were it to become public. And if her reputation suffers, so will Homie in the long run. This matter is a whole other league. I agreed to this plan because there was no better option in the short run also. Should it come out, I can simply say, I delegated work to the servants without Her Highness knowing about it. But if we keep it up for too long, I can't believably take the blame anymore. Vassar was right, but still didn't wish to simply dismiss Nadine's remark. Of the things you told me about your society, many seem strange to me, but I do agree that some of our traditions might be better forgotten. Either way, it is not within my power to change how things are done, not yet at least. And that is why I have to get back to being able to do this on my own as fast as possible. Which you won't if you don't rest properly. The doctor chimed in. The only nobles in my direct service are Vassar, Captain Casca, and you. She reminded her of those. Only Vassar can be of any help to me with my work. And he has other duties. As have the two of you. Okay, but even if you pull through this crunch time, you are also overworking yourself. When you were healthy, Nadine guided them back to their original topic. To the point where you didn't even notice you got poisoned. You can't keep this up. So ignoring all the glaring problems, in the last couple of statements, for now, why not just hire nobles then? Because heirs usually don't receive education in governing. After all, they know they won't inherit the title and learn something else instead. Unless their promised partner is an heir, of course, but it should be obvious why I can't hire those or actual heirs. Not even as practitioners. So Granny once more looked up from her work. What do you mean by practitioners, huh? No, I didn't say practitioners. I said practitioners. Now all three were staring at her. The small alien sighed. You just heard the same word twice, didn't you? So Vanny nodded. Stupid translator. Okay, what I meant was, why not hire heirs that are just about to finish their education? Temporarily, of course. Just say that you want to offer them tutelage. Sure, you'd have to teach them at first, but they'd know at least all the theory. That way you get assistance. They get practical experience and can brag that they received an education from the royal family, which in turn will improve your standing with their families. Win-win. If you employ them with some offset, each can even learn in the next one. So Vanny went quiet for a moment. Okay, that is actually a really good idea. Falpion sat at her window and watched the sky. As a child, space had never really piqued her interest. But the recent event had changed her views now. Every evening after her lessons, she'd always spend a bit of time just looking at the stars. I wonder how it is to be up there. Unfortunately, it would never happen. The only people who would go there were soldiers and ambassadors. And as the only child of her parents, she couldn't abandon the county or Ryak. For that matter, as if on cue, a knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Sister, are you there? Yes. She called back and hurried to the door. In the frame stood Ryak, as always accompanied by a servant. She dismissed the servant with a nod, took her adopted brother's hand, and carefully guided him to a chair. How can I help you, Duke Ryak? Hey, don't call me that. He responded with acute annoyance. He always reacted like that when she called him that, and she just couldn't stop it. Technically, he was indeed a duke, ever since his parents had died in a shuttle crash, when they both were small children. Due to their closeness, Falpion's parents had taken him in, even if the difference in rank had caused some problems. But just one more cycle, then he would be an adult and inherit the title. Officially. Sorry. Want to watch it again? She put her datapad on the table and started the recording of the trial that had taken place 16 days ago. Just as she had done each evening since then. The first time, they had actually watched it for the trial. The other 15 times for something else. Her eyes were glued to the screen, as the short figure stood up. Can you describe her again? She's short, Falpion began. Almost like when we were children. but thinner. Her body looks smooth, no carapace or scales, and has a light shade of pink. Ryakin hadn't been born blind, so he knew what colors were. It was the accident that had cost him his eyes. The frame zoomed in and she could see more details. Falpion paused the video because she knew she would begin to speak soon. On top of her head is a large patch of fur, so long it flows down her shoulders, with a color like white with a golden hue. Her eyes are small, but they look like blue gems on a white pillow. Her first attempts at describing the alien had been quite clumsy, but after 15 repetitions, she would say she had become good at it. After she was done, they listened to her soft voice, Ryakin even more thoroughly than her, since he couldn't see her. Once the speech was over, she put the datapad away. The rest of the video didn't interest them. After all, I wonder how she is in person. Falpion couldn't help but wonder. Ryakin just nodded along quietly. Too bad, we'll never meet her. Huh? Why not? Her brother asked, confused. I heard your parents requested a meeting. Isn't there at least a chance? Number of ambassadors are never here for long. Living on another planet is too taxing at best. She'll meet half of the biggest ducal clans, even if some of them miss their chance. A count is too low in rank to get a turn. The request was a mere formality. For a while, they just sat next to each other in silence. Do you think we can meet other humans one day? Who knows? You may be good once you are a duke for real. I'll make sure to invite you then. Probably not a good idea, considering the difference in rank. I'll do it anyway. She couldn't help but chuckle at that. Neither of the two knew about the distress Falpion's parents were currently feeling over a message that had just reached them. The Princess and the Human Book, 2CH4. Silvani leaned back as she watched the servants disassemble their temporary desks in her quarters. They were finally done with the crunch time. As Nadine had called it, her work wasn't done by any means, but the rest she could manage by herself, even if her capacity was still reduced. Walking also had started to get easier for her, and over short distances, she no longer needed someone to lean on. According to the doctor, she wouldn't fully recover until her next molting cycle. Her current one was about to end, so it was too late for that to fix anything. But luckily, the internal damage from the calcium had been low, considering the circumstances. As long as she was careful, she would even be able to receive guests again soon. On top of that, it was also time to schedule Nadine's first outing. The mere thought made her recall the dialogue the two had after the trial. It almost made her paranoid to let Nadine out. But she knew those fears had no basis. She knew she could trust Nadine, not to mention that the small alien wanted this knowledge to be public just as much as she did, in other words. Absolutely not at all, Your Highness. The voice of her head maid pulled Silvoni out of her thought. Yes, Mida. You seemed lost in thought. Is something on your mind? Well, 16 days prior. Have you ever heard the equilibrium of terror, or what was the other term for it? Ah, right. Mutually assured destruction. No, can't say I have. But both terms sounded quite menacing. Definitely not like something that was to thank for lasting peace. Okay then, how do I explain this? The small alien began. Imagine you had a weapon that was so powerful that it could end any conflict in an instant. Ships, no matter the size, enemy armies, or even entire countries, all of that you could wipe out with the press of one button. There is no such weapon, so Danny said, without even thinking about it. Hypothetically, imagine there was. And for the sake of the thought experiment further, imagine you were the kind of person that had absolutely no qualms about using such a weapon. What would that mean politically? The princess really didn't like to think about something that was so morbid and so far off from reality at the same time. But Nadine was clearly trying to get somewhere with this, so she complied. Well, I guess militarily speaking, if we had such a weapon, then none of the others could oppose us, because they would lose the moment they initiate conflict. Yes, exactly. But here is the catch. Everyone else has that weapon as well. They still can't stop you from using it. But they can fire back. So Danny stared at Nadine for a solid moment before speaking again. Wait. So what you are basically saying is every party could, at any point, wipe out whoever they wanted. But the targeted parties could always drag them down with them. Nadine nodded. You got it. That's what mutually assured destruction means. Considering our history, it's probably the closest to peace we're ever gonna get. So that is how they ended their wars. No actual peace, but rather an armistice no one can survive to break. Wait, realization didn't hit Salvani immediately. But when it did so with full force. So far, the example had been purely hypothetical. But now... Nadine? If what you say is true, does that mean... Are you saying humanity has... She didn't need to finish to make Nadine nod. It's objectively speaking. It's really stupid. Funny, even if it wasn't so sad. I am not sure if I should tell you about this weapon. I don't want to introduce it to your culture, but then again, if you make contact with humanity, you'll have the technology eventually anyway. But such a weapon must be insanely complicated to build. So Vanny tried to assure, still in half denial. Why would any species even want something so terrible? Nope. Once you figure out how the basis of it works, it's super easy. It wasn't even planned. I mean, with nukes, while the potential was discovered by accident, the thing itself was intentionally developed. An antimatter, well, that is always a bomb. But this thing, it was supposed to provide new possibilities for us. But as soon as it was done, it also was a weapon. As it was no changes necessary. Didn't take long for someone to realize it. The idea apparently wasn't new. And well, if there is one thing humans are really good at, it's finding out how to turn something into a weapon. The princess had no idea what this nuke was. That was apparently not as bad, nor did she know whether or not she even wanted to know it. But one thing she knew for sure. She could never allow this weapon to be introduced to the Alliance, not if she could prevent it. I'm sorry that I'm so vague about this, Sil. But no, that is good. Silvani interrupted Nadine. I am sorry, but under the authority of hospitality, I prohibit you from telling anyone about this weapon or how it works. Don't even hint at it. Under normal circumstances, an order of hospitality would be considered a grave insult. It was more or less the only real way one could exert authority over a political guest. At least as so long as they didn't commit a crime. It basically meant that the hospitality was now tied to a condition, which normally was something to be avoided at all costs. And doing this to Nadine felt even worse, since she had nowhere to go. But Silvani couldn't help it. For this instance, her role to her people outweighed her role as a friend. But to her surprise, Nadine smiled and seemed glad. Yes, Your Highness, she said with audible relief in her voice. Present day, nothing important. Bear it no mind. But while you're here, have you heard anything from my parents? We received no message from them, no. That was strange. By now, 16 days had passed since the trial had ended, but her parents still hadn't invited Nadine to the Sun Palace. Nor had they just shown up unannounced. Considering all she knew about her parents, at least one of those things should have happened by now. Other side of the planet be damned. Not that she was complaining. The mere thought of the meeting provided her with headaches that rivaled the ones she had during her calcium poisoning, so from that standpoint she certainly didn't mind. Nevertheless, it was weird, or at the very least, atypical for them. Were they still so occupied with keratin that they didn't care? Unlikely, but possible. The only other explanations that she could think of, either that they were distracted with something else, or that they hadn't watched the trial, and also hadn't heard about Nadine through gossip. The latter she could safely rule out. But what options were there for the former? Certainly no normal day-to-day business that had never stopped them when they had set their minds to something. That was the downside of working on the other side of the planet. Sure, it made it easier to isolate her parents from external affairs, but it also isolated her from internal ones. But we are done sorting through the requests from the noble clans wishing to meet Lady Nadine. I compiled the list, but it is pretty much everyone, and I doubt I have to tell you the priorities. I briefly spoke to her when I met her this morning. She says that she is still nervous about it, but ready. She even got a new set of clothes. That was good to hear. They still didn't know how much time Nadine would still have to spend on Homie, so this could open many doors for her. But she also said that, if possible, she'd like not to meet a big shot right from the start, but I'm not sure if that is doable. No, it is. Just call her over later, so we can come up with something. Since no one on Homie knew about human culture, they just needed to find something in the invitations that could be a breach of a made-up tradition, or an actual one who knew. Either way, it would give her an excuse to refuse. According to history, refusing invitations during a first contact because of something like that had been a common occurrence in the early days of the Alliance. And she knew the nobles knew that as well. And she could understand the girl handling a ducal clan without building up some confidence was probably not a good idea. Even better, it would mean when she would eventually meet a big shot on their second or third attempt at inviting her, they would be apologetic and more forthcoming. For now, there were a handful of comital territories, and not far from one of those should be a good start. What do you mean she accepted? Countess of Spine asked in half denial. I mean, as I say, lady. The servant paused for a moment, then pulled out his datapad. Nadine Valentina Esmeralda, Anastasia von Claude of House Hayden accepts your invitation and offers to meet you on the 112th of the cycle. She emphasizes that no political matters shall be discussed and that she merely wishes to socialize. But how? We should be way too low in rank to even have a shot. The invitation was purely a formality. Count Aurelius pointed out that I don't know. Her message makes no mention of that. I can only assume that the other invitations were over-enthusiastic and ended up breaching a human tradition. The two looked at their respective partner as they slowly started to comprehend the situation. Since neither of them had expected their invitation to even be looked at, they hadn't made any preparations either. And now answer had arrived on such short notice. Still, they couldn't possibly back out now. The reputation of Clan Silpian wouldn't survive that. They had to act fast. The mansion was in turmoil. Servants ran through the halls without any regard for the image they created, and rarely nor could any normal talk be heard amongst all the shouting. Needless to say, it didn't go past the two youngest members of the household that something was amiss. What is going on? Ryakin asked his adoptive sister, confused. The young heiress could feel him getting tenser by the tig as he clung to her left arms. Don't worry, everything is fine. Everyone is just very busy and loud. The blind boy complained in loud, she agreed. Maybe mother or father know what's going on. Guiding her brother through the busy hallways was a challenge. Alone, she probably could have managed to slip past everyone without much trouble, but she couldn't possibly leave him alone right now. In the end, her father was the one the pair found first, standing in the atrium and barking orders. The pair didn't exactly sneak up on him, but he was still distracted enough to not notice them and got startled once they stood behind him. What are you two doing here? Shouldn't you be busy with your studies? They ended almost an inve ago, Ryakin pointed out. It's that late already. Damn it. Despite his distress, he quickly caught himself and took on a more dignified demeanor. Listen, an important guest will arrive soon, and we had to order a lot of things for her visit that just arrived today, so we must hurry to get everything ready before she gets here. Doesn't the mansion always keep a reserve for surprise guests? Ryakin asked, curiously. Yes. That would only be unusable if the visitor was an alien, Falpian added, and you said she. Realization dawned on the human Count. Ariella sighed. Yes. The guest is Lady Nadine. No, you can't come with us and meet her. Faces of utter disbelief were the answer. Why are you surprised about that? This could be one of the most important guests our planet has seen in generations. And for whatever first one's damned reason, we are the ones hosting her. You do not have the experience to receive, or don't embarrass our kind. You will stay upstairs and not leave your rooms. Right afterward, he went back to shouting orders. Dejected, the pair left the atrium. You aren't leading me to your room, Ryakin realized after a while. And not toward mine either. Of course not, Falpine affirmed with audible smugness in her voice. Do you really want to miss this chance? Of course not, he parroted. Good now, better be quiet though. I doubt anyone will notice us with all of this chaos. She led him to the gallery, where they waited for a while, until all the buzzing died down. When the halls were empty again, they snuck through the back entrance, and after a couple of turns, ended on a walkway that was slightly elevated from the garden. It was framed by a low balustrade that could hide them when they sat down, which was why they did exactly that. As they leaned against the stone, they could hear her. That are all still very new to me. Her Highness and I are currently testing how an exchange of our admittedly very different cultures could profit all of us. There she was, live. Her voice was even softer than on the recording. The two barely listened to what she was actually saying. They were way too mesmerized by the mere sound. It was frustrating that they couldn't directly talk with her, but still, Ryakin could probably just sit there and listen for hours. Falpine, on the other hand, eventually succumbed to a temptation that was foreign to him. I'm gonna take a look. Are you crazy? What if they see you just a quick peek? And so she did a bit away. She saw her parents. To focused on their guest to notice her. Said guest, on the other hand, was sitting with her back to so all she could see was the long mane of the curly, silvery fur with the faint golden hue. The recording had not done it any justice. But she knew she wouldn't see her face like this, and the longer she stared, the higher was the risk of getting caught. Reluctantly, she sat back down behind her hiding spot, and went back to listening. On a different note, may I ask about your children? We actually just have one, a daughter, Falpian's mother answered. But we are also taking care of the heir of Clan Ryler until he is old enough to inherit his title. I see, and those two. They wouldn't happen to be close to finishing their education. Well, close is a relative term. They still got a lot to learn. But they know how to behave. So, don't worry. They won't bother us. Oh, I would hardly be bothered by their presence. On the contrary, if it is fine with you, I would love to meet them. Are you sure? Her father inquired. Lasting friendships, bridge generations, do they not? Well, that they do. Falpine almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this happening? Were they really about to meet her? Very well then, I shall have them called, momentarily. We need to get back to our rooms, thank you. But there is no need. They heard me. Falpine and Ryakin, who had been about to sneak back, froze.